Hey everyone, and welcome to the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show, live on Rumble, where facts come first and where news is done right. And today we have lots of big breaking news to cover, along with an all-star slate of guests. We will talk with two FBI whistleblowers who are exposing massive politicization inside the Bureau and revealing even more details on the credibility crisis inside the FBI. And that is just ahead. But we lead off tonight with more evidence of how much the media ignored the most critical facts in their January 6th coverage, and how new footage that was kept from the public is undermining the prevailing narrative about the events at the U.S. Capitol. Because new video released by Tucker Carlson and provided by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy shows convicted January 6th rioter known as QAnon Sherman actually being escorted onto the Senate floor by Capitol Police officers. And at one point, the officers even tried to unlock a door as he made his way through the Capitol. Take a look.
Virtually every moment of his time inside the Capitol was caught on tape. The tapes show that Capitol Police never stopped Jacob Chansley. They helped him. They acted as his tour guides. Here's video of Chansley in the Senate chamber. Capitol Police officers take him to multiple entrances and even try to open locked doors for him.
Now, of course, none of this is to defend or make excuses for any of his behavior or to downplay the violence on that day. But the facts do matter, and transparency does matter. Why was this kept? And the reality is that this footage was withheld by Democrats, hidden by the Biden DOJ, and ignored by most of the media to push a false narrative about what actually happened on January 6th. So we're here to bring you the facts, and we're going to let you decide. Now, the man you saw in that video, whose real name is Jacob Chansley, was sentenced to 4 years in prison for his actions. But it raises even more questions, because a centerpiece of our justice system and of our sentencing system is proportionality. Does that sentence seem excessive? Does it seem proportional? As a former prosecutor, I can tell you, making prosecutorial decisions based on politics or based on optics or based on public pressure undermines our rule of law, and it undermines the faith and credibility of our justice system. Now, the video also shows that Officer Brian Sicknick, who died from a stroke the day after the riot, didn't appear injured during his confrontation with the demonstrators. But that never stopped the media and Democrats or Liz Cheney from trying to claim otherwise. So, it's important to remember that when you follow major media coverage, sometimes the biggest story is what they aren't telling you. Which brings us to our next story, as we are now learning that disgraced former CNN boss Jeff Zucker reportedly told employees not to cover the COVID lab leak theory because it was, quote, a Trump talking point, prompting network talent to go on air and attack the theory as a racist conspiracy theory that was not based upon facts. But as we know, even the FBI and the Biden Energy Department believe COVID came from a lab, and the evidence backing up the theory grows and grows. Here's FBI Director Chris Wray testifying in front of the Senate yesterday. Take a look.
As the committee knows, the FBI has long assessed, going all the way back to the summer of 2021, that the origin of the pandemic was likely a lab incident in Wuhan.
Or to put it another way, Trump was right again. It's just another example of how major news outlets make political decisions under the disguise of editorial judgment, and how continued lies, smears, and false narratives are undermining our major institutions, from major news groups to even federal law enforcement. As we've also been spotlighting FBI whistleblowers who are continuing to speak out bravely and courageously about threat tags that are being used to target conservatives. According to these whistleblowers who have spoken to the House Judiciary Committee, pro-life Americans Catholic attendees of Latin Mass, and parents have all been branded by the FBI as potential domestic terrorists. Let that sink in. And it's now a major focus of House Republicans, as attacks on free speech and the push for censorship at the apparent direction of the FBI is just another example of how the tools of intelligence are being turned against we, the people. And here now to explain more on all of this, fabulous guest today. We're so happy that they joined us. Kyle Seraphin, who is an indefinitely suspended FBI agent who blew the whistle on threat tags against parents, along with Steve Friend, who became an FBI whistleblower in 2022 after making protected disclosures to Congress about the FBI's politicized behavior in probing January 6th. What an honor to be on the program with both of you today. I applaud you guys for your courage and your patriotism to get the truth out there. So thank you for being on the program.
Thanks for having us.
All right. And Kyle, I'll begin with you. Why did you decide, because people always want to know kind of the motivation, the process, because you have to think about a lot of things, how it's going to affect your family, your life. Why did you decide to become a whistleblower?
I'm not sure that I had a long decision about it. I got the email that was forwarded on from another supervisor in my office. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, designated to come down to the frontline agents. And when I read it, I immediately thought there was a problem with it. And I made an appointment with my congresswoman's office, who is Yvette Harrell in the 2nd District of New Mexico. And a couple days later, I showed up in the office, sat down with her law enforcement liaison and community outreach coordinator. And I did about 3 hours of describing some of the problems with the FBI. That was one of them. There were a bunch more, unfortunately, because at that time, we had 10,000 Afghan refugees that were in 2 different military bases in our little area of responsibility. And so I saw a bunch of things that were going wrong there, too, as you can imagine. I brought them just a whole host of issues. That's the one that took off and went to Jim Jordan's office in a big way. But there's a lot of things that go wrong in the FBI at this point.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about the background, your career, your time at the FBI.
So I joined the FBI when I was 35, which is a little later than most. I'd served in the military. I was in the Air Force when I was in my late 20s. Before that, I had done finance at a movie studio, and I'd run restaurants, and I'd worked for Dell Computers and did corporate sales, and I did a whole bunch of other kind of like regular guy jobs. And then kind of ended up in the FBI's space with a lot more experience than many of my Quantico classmates. I was 10 years older than a handful of them. And, you just have a different sense of what's right and wrong, I think, if you have more experience in the world, which I did. And as that kind of went on, it led me to work 5 years with the Washington Field Office. I did 2 years of counterintelligence work, working against the Chinese threat, which is obviously significant.
Yes.
I spent 3 years on a specialty surveillance team that did a little bit of everything. So I got to taste a little bit of all the bureau's kind of flavors. We did some counterterrorism work as kind of a very specific specialty. And then I did a bunch of white collar and drugs and gangs and like you name it. Got a little bit of everything out there. And then I just tried to get out of the politics of it, and I ended up in New Mexico for a year. And that's when I got into the politics of it for real, which was doing this whistleblower thing. So it's kind of God has a different plan than what I did, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah, he always does. So talk to us a little bit more about what you saw that shocked your conscience and made you want to speak out, that you said, wow, this is outrageous and something needs to be done about it.
So I brought the things to my congresswoman's attention, and then the retribution against me was really significant. And this also combined with some of the things that went on with the COVID mandates that happened. I'm a pro-life guy. I'm a lifelong Catholic and, come and gone from the church. But at this point, my wife and I are steadfast in it. It's just been reassuring our faith. So it's kind of a weird thing to see when you're being targeted for your faith. You're being targeted for doing what you're told is the right thing to do, which is call out when there's a misstep. And the misstep that I specifically called out was not that the FBI was going to be investigating parents. It's what appeared to be lies by the Attorney General in front of Congress. So that was an allegation of perjury that I brought forward. And the FBI just came at me all the way. They kicked me out of the office. They put me on AWOL, which I didn't even know was a thing for civil servants. And then when they did let me come back in, they stripped me of all my duties, my responsibilities. They literally put me in a corner. I sat in a corner for 6 weeks with no cases. And even though they called me an insider threat, which is to say like a traitor or a potential spy, right, they moved me from a criminal job to a national security squad, assigned me no cases, and then eventually pulled my security clearance, kicked me out, took my paycheck. And, at that point, I ended up going and talked to Dan Bongino about it all because you only really have one court that you can go to as a whistleblower, it turns out, as a federal whistleblower. You've got to go to the court of public opinion, which is why we're talking right now. Is I just made a decision that this is America's information. It's not mine. and I'm not going to let the FBI steamroll me and my family.
Yeah, absolutely. It is America's information. Well stated. It's just disgraceful that you're doing your job, you're honoring your country, and they tried to destroy you, destroy your family, take your livelihood, ostracize you within their own agency. Were there any conversations with some of your co-workers or superiors there that you felt were really, inappropriate and really showed the bias that they had?
Yes and no. So when it was all going on and I was still in the office, I got kind of this feedback like, I don't think this is that big a deal and this shouldn't be a thing. And you're going to come back to work and it's going to be fine. And that was my immediate supervisor on the second squad I was on. But the real telling thing is that I had colleagues that were apparently testifying behind my back to the equal opportunity investigators and saying, all these wild things about me, that I was either racist, sexist, or homophobic. They couldn't pinpoint which one, but I was one of those things, obviously,
right.
Which led me to believe that I really wasn't pushing the envelope, because I obviously could have been transphobic and xenophobic too if I was really ambitious.
Yeah, you were
so I missed out on some
underachiever,
opportunities.
right.
That's exactly right. So, and then the real telling part is after you get kicked out of the office like that, the number of people that have reached out to me from the FBI is very, very small, at least in the office that I was in. There's really only one guy in that office that I still am able to speak to because they just don't speak to me. That being said, people that I've known throughout my time, in Washington, D.C. and stuff, we're still in really good contact and they know my character. We spend a lot of time working together. So I hear from them, but it is telling that the people in the office really got chilled and probably felt the fear of God of losing their own paycheck and pension. So they kind of just ditched me.
Yeah, loyal to the paycheck, right? They're thinking, okay, if I do anything like this or if I associate with him, that something's going to happen to me. It's awful.
We call it the golden handcuff.
The golden handcuff? Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of a lonely place to be, I have to say, right? And then, but then you've got other individuals that come out and speak out, which is great. And Steve, I want to follow up on with you on that. Talk about your career and tell the folks like what it means for you when you became an FBI agent and the process that you went through, and especially as it relates to the threat tags with the January 6th investigations.
Well, thank you very much. I joined the FBI a couple of years before Kyle did. I was initially sent to the Midwest, where I worked for 7 years on Indian reservations. And that's sort of relevant to my journey because it gave me a lot of repetitions on case management. I'd opened up about 200 cases in my time there. And then also had the opportunity to go to trial multiple times, which is pretty unusual for the FBI. So when I eventually relocated my family to Florida in 2021 with the understanding that I was going to be working child pornography investigations, and then subsequently was told that those were no longer a priority and I needed to focus on domestic terrorism, AKA January 6th, I brought that background with me and looked at the cases and the way that they were being handled and immediately realized that the FBI is departing from its rules with regard to the case management. And my initial concern was essentially, if we go to trial, I want to win if it's a righteous case. And so regardless of the politics of it or what you think happened that day, if the Department of Justice brings charges, I was taking it on good faith that they were righteous. And my fear was that we were not turning over the necessary exculpatory evidence and advising these defendants about these atypical practices, and it could come back to bite us at trial. And essentially, I would wind up sitting there in front of a defense attorney and having to answer, agent friend, this is your case. Did you do anything on it? And I would say no.
Yeah, it's an unusual position to find yourself in. But what I think people also want to know, Steve, is how does this all kind of work inside the Bureau? Is it coming from the top down? What is the chain of command? Because honestly, it's terrible. Like, you're an FBI agent. There's been so much, in the press where people are upset and feel like it's so politicized. I am quite sure, because the existence of both of you, there are good people inside the FBI. How is this happening, this level of dysfunction and the politicization where it's just like these targeted, focused investigations for a political purpose?
I think it's a combination of two things. I think that there are the true believers, and they're bringing these cases because they indeed do view a lot of the right-wing Americans as the threat. But I think a larger component of that is the integrated program management protocols that the FBI has for itself, where think of it as a local police department has a quota for writing traffic tickets. So essentially, they set these metrics for themselves to achieve, and those are tied to funding for the FBI as a whole for each individual field office. And then ultimately, for the senior executive service members who run each field office, their compensation is tied to hitting these metrics. So it creates a perverse incentive to generate cases and certain statistical accomplishments and quantity over quality and integrity of those cases.
Yeah, it's interesting because you said it does provide a perverse incentive, because it sounds like it's sort of a system where you benefit if you bring these things forward. And in what way? They get promotions, etc., because people are then willing to abandon sort of their ethics or morality and just go ahead and be part of these politicized investigations?
Well, I think once you're at the senior executive service level, the rungs are kind of growing short at the top of that. There's definitely ambition at that rank, but it's really more incumbent to me, at least for the middle management types. And when you have this political narrative that something like January 6th is the largest and most important investigation that's gone on in the FBI since the Civil War now, I guess, according to the Democrats, and you have an ambition to rise in the ranks of the FBI, you want to sink your teeth and hooks into that case. So you have individuals who are just ambitious and they are willing to put their head down and do what they're told in order to claim that managerial responsibility and ultimately promote.
It's like mercenaries, and just regardless of, the consequences. But, honestly, Stephen, when you think about it, did you like and respect, and I'll ask Kyle the same question, the majority of the men and women that you worked with in the agency, or do you think there's just some serious damage and flaws there that need to be vastly corrected?
I was very fortunate in my career to work in two offices that were relatively small, sort of high speed, low drag. So I shared a lot of sentiments with those individuals where we just wanted to work and do the good work that was there. I think, though, that there is a cultural gap between the management and the rank and file agents in the FBI that has just been exposed in the last few years. And there's definitely a lack of connection between those individuals who just kind of see it as their trip on up the ladder, and into other folks like myself and like Kyle who just really just joined the FBI to do the job of an FBI agent, not to be promoted or to retire with a cushy pension. It was always about the oath of office that we took from the very beginning. It was something that I took seriously, and unfortunately, I've come to realize that so many people are viewing that oath of office as being similar to an iPhone user agreement, and they just click agree.
Unbelievable. That's a very good analogy. I mean, Kyle, what do you think what about your personal experience, working in different departments that you did, and the men and women that you came across?
So there seems to be kind of two types of agents specifically. Now, the Bureau has 38,000 total employees. So the agents only make up about 13 or 14,000 of that. So it's by no means the majority of the people that actually work in the FBI. But when you kind of separate out agents, there's two types. There's ones that want to work cases, and they're generally almost fighting to stay at the bottom. They're like a diver that won't get rid of a weight belt. They're hanging out at the bottom where they can do the work. They get paid commensurate with even the middle management, but when they've been there long enough. So there's no real incentive for them to move into management, at least not financially, unless they think that they're going to put this 10-year kind of trial on their family, where they're going to just get bumped around to different possibilities and places, and they may have to go back and forth to DC. Because I was in DC, I got to see the revolving door that goes between the Washington field office and the headquarters building at J. Edgar Hoover building. And that is a very different animal altogether. Now, one of my buddies who's a little bit more cynical than I am said that a GS-15 in the FBI is someone who's never said no to a bad idea. That's going to be the assistant special agents in charge and above. And that makes every single person who's a senior executive fit into that category. I don't think he's actually wrong anymore. The more I kind of see it, these people are willing to go along to get along. They have that golden handcuff. They're looking to put, another $10,000 a year on their pension or whatever it looks like they're going to do. If they can get a $30,000 bonus for 3 years in a row, then they will add $10,000 to their actual pension. And apparently that's enough for them to care about, making bad decisions or not throwing the flag when there is a bad decision. And in the meantime, you got guys like Steve who are literally fighting to not become a supervisor, who are resisting the request for them to put in that package, and they stay there working the cases until, their 20 or 25 years mandatory retirement. And then they're out. They never get a chance to make that management change. So I do think that there's a kind of a toxic culture and a reverse incentive for the kind of people that want to be really good agents.
Yeah, that's a shame, because it used to be an agency people really, respected and looked up to. And I always try to be positive, find the problem, but, bring the solution. And Kyle, I'll go to you on this, then get Stephen's impression. But so if the FBI leadership actually really wanted to change this, perverse incentivization that they do, and to right these wrongs, what would it look like? Like, what do they need to do to actually fix it?
It's probably a really complicated question because they're not the ones necessarily setting the agenda. Unfortunately, I think a lot of this stuff was set in motion on September 11th or September 12th of
Yeah.
2001. And when the FBI accepted the national security mission and the domestic, intelligence mission, they really moved into an intelligence agency that has a law enforcement capability, and that is secret police level stuff. It didn't, it took years for that culture to take over. But intelligence communities are very, very different. Intelligence agencies are different than law enforcement agencies, and the burden of proof and the standards and the process, they're all sort of antithetical to each other. And so as a prosecutor, you would know that you've got to go through certain things. There's due process, there is discovery. You have to know that all the information you have has to meet a certain standard if you want to get it, whether it's probable cause and so on. When it comes to intelligence, it's a very different animal. They believe that they're entitled to that information because the mission is good and it's never going to be seen in court. But when you actually have the ability to take that information that shouldn't ever see the light of day in a court proceeding, and you can reconstruct it under legal processes, it's I don't know if you can even salvage something like this. And that's why it's so dangerous, because it's so pervasive that it's probably 60 or 70% of the Bureau is now intelligence focused. And so, far less of it is based on the actual law enforcement mission that most Americans have as front of mind awareness.
That's unbelievable. Okay, so what is your answer to that, Stephen, in terms of your perception of what the path to reform is?
I think that the management track needs to be completely reformed. If you're indeed going to keep this agency and you're going to make a go of it and try to improve it, the tempo for that and having somebody have to elevate every 18 months and the pressure that they have to undergo for that, it self-selects for a certain type of person. And that is a person who, like Kyle said, doesn't say no to a bad idea. That's a person who spends their first 6 months coming up with an initiative and their next 6 months looking for their next job, and then their final 6 months implementing their ultimate transfer to the next rung up on the ladder. Instead, we need to allow these subject matter experts to begrudgingly have to take management roles over their subordinates, right, and in fact, exist in that role for 7-10 years, impart the knowledge and let them kind of be in place, as opposed to having be pressured to go back and forth to the swamp where that virus just infects everybody.
All right, now you've both been attacked in the media, obviously, and accused of having ulterior motives, of course, right? That's the playbook. What's your response to that, Kyle?
Oh, it's pretty straightforward. I was 27 years old and I worked for a movie studio. I worked for Warner Brothers doing financial analysis, and I thought that was a pretty good gig. I had the least amount of work I've ever done in my life, and I made the most amount of money for doing it. And I went and took a pay cut and made $18,000 a year to enlist in the United States Air Force because I believe in this country and I believe in the values of this country. And I wanted to serve in that way. And when I left there, I turned around. I was working as a civilian paramedic. I thought I might go back into medicine, and I happened to throw in an application for the FBI. And when they asked me to show up, I did. I got 3 days notice to show up to Quantico, and I drove across the country and, left my wife behind. And I saw her one time because we're responsible people who believe in sort of the values of this country. We paid off her student loan debt instead of having her fly out to see me. And I served in that role because I thought it was the right thing to do. And when I saw things were wrong, I threw the flag on it. This wasn't the first whistleblower activity I did. It's the first whistleblower activity I did outside of the FBI. But I brought things to the attention of the Office of General Counsel on how to reform internal stuff because I saw them as problems, not just as an American, but also as an FBI agent, that I wanted the agency to do things in the right way. And I wanted our process to be clean and pure because the government doesn't really get to weigh in on the outcomes. Like, our only interest as FBI agents should be on a fair process. And as I told someone the other day, one of my proudest moments was actually demoing my own case by finding exculpatory evidence. That should be the goal of every single investigator, to be a skeptic and then to go to try to disprove your case. Absolutely. And as you do that, you end up proving it. If that's not the way we're working, then I have a problem with it. So if anybody doubts those motives, and they think that that's an impure way of doing it, that's their opinion. Most people that I run across come up and agree that what we're doing is the right thing. And, the cost was fairly significant. It wasn't like I was turned around and someone offered me a huge lucrative book deal. In fact, Steve just wrote a book and he did it for no money. He got no advance on it. He just wrote it because it was the thing that he wanted to share. So there's not been a financial incentive here. There's not been anything other than knowing that I'm going to try and leave the world a little bit better off for my children, of which I have several, and I hope they have a better America than what we're seeing right now.
Well, that's fantastic. God bless. Couldn't agree more. And Stephen, how's this journey been for you in terms of being attacked? How has it affected you personally? And what's your kind of take on it at this point?
Well, I think it's just been very disappointing to me. I brought my concerns forward. Part of being a whistleblower is you have a reasonable belief that something is resulting in an unnecessary risk to public safety. It could be a waste, fraud, or abuse. You don't have to be right. And the best thing that the FBI and Congress and the Inspector General could do is just look at the veracity of my complaint, and they could have said, Steve, you're right, we're going to fix the problem, and I would have gone back to work. Or they could have said, Steve, you're wrong, here's why, and I would have gone back to work. But instead, they concentrated all their fire, all their energy, and all their resources onto just attacking the messenger, which to me means you get all the flack when you're over the target, and that they know that I'm right. And anybody who subscribes to the belief that I willingly gave up a $130,000 paycheck in the obscure hope that in a couple months later I would get a $5,000 bribe is just irrational and illogical. And I really have to question your motives at that point.
Exactly. And so where do things stand for you now, Stephen?
Well, I actually requested to seek outside employment from the FBI in accordance with the paperwork and the directives that they gave me, and they rejected me in one business day. So I was forced to essentially resign the day that I testified in front of the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the federal government. That morning, I resigned as a special agent, and I've gone to work now as a fellow for the Center for Renewing America, and I'm going to be advising on domestic intelligence and security services, and hopefully advising this committee on where the bodies are buried with the FBI. So, in a cruel twist of irony, they investigated me, and now I get to investigate them back.
I know. Investigate the investigators, we always said, that's for sure. And Kyle, how about for you, in terms of where you're at right now, having gone through this whole process, where do you stand and what's your path?
So I sold my house in September of last year, knowing that we were going to have some financial hardship possibly coming our way. And we wanted to make sure that we were as lean and mean as possible. So my wife and I moved our 3 children into my parents' house, who are in their 70s, and took over half of their home. I'm sitting in a trailer right now where I shoot a little podcast 3 times a week, and we expose FBI malfeasance and other government malfeasance. And one of the things that I think that I'm going to do is that I can't take a job that's going to stop me from doing what I've been doing, which is basically exposing these things. I coordinate with whistleblowers every single day within the Bureau. I expose them on a regular basis. I've been writing. I've been obviously taping these podcasts and things like that, and doing interviews with folks like you. So I'm indefinitely suspended. I expect forever. I don't think the FBI will ever come to terms with me, which is fine. And at some point, we'll monetize some of the things we're doing. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like I already knew what this path was going to be. You guys are the two type of men we should be applauding and saying, okay, holding you up as an example of honesty, integrity, and transparency, but it's gotten very backwards these days. So I'm just wondering, do you believe that we're going to see any other whistleblowers come forward as it relates, to the FBI? Have you heard anything? Did you see people that were, obviously, I hope, inspired by what you guys did and want to make a difference? And Stephen, I'll go to you, and then back to Kyle.
Well, I'm hopeful that this select committee will do a job here of balancing the emotional appeal that we saw nonstop for 2 years with the January 6th committee, but actually bringing forward whistleblowers and prioritize how the processes have been weaponized against us. Because if they do that indeed and get the information presented to them to expose a lot of what's going on within the FBI, and the would-be whistleblowers that are now currently with the agency see that folks like Kyle and the others that have come forward get the protection that they're owed by law, then they will feel comfortable coming forward, and then the select committee won't need to do nearly the amount of investigating and subpoenaing because those individuals will. And that's where I'm hoping that they kind of strike the balance here. We didn't see it with the initial committee hearing, but hopefully going forward, more anecdotes, more hard-hitting evidence that can be presented to the American population.
Yeah, it's you hope so. You want to remain positive, but we also have to, there's a little bit of cynicism thrown in it with it. Kyle, so what about for you in terms of this?
So today's day 325 since I got kicked out of the office that I was working in. And what's fun about that is that the number of whistleblowing activities that I did since that time is it's almost double digits at this point. I think it's 8 or 9. Wow. We're climbing towards it. And a lot of that is because I coordinate with other whistleblowers who, they see that I've already gone through the door. I've already taken whatever hits I'm going to hit, and I'm not going to fall over because of it. So they feed things through me that go to Congress. And when people look and say, where are the whistleblowers at? A lot of times you're not going to ever see or hear from them. That's actually the nature of the whistleblower laws, is they can actually go behind the scenes. They don't have to expose themselves. They don't have to go on Fox. They don't have to show up on podcasts or on radio interviews. I've chosen to do that because it gives me an opportunity to protect them in some ways and give some top cover by letting the American people know what's happening behind the scenes. And so I don't know that we're going to see them publicly per se, unless, they decide, their information has been passed along to the Weaponization Committee. If they get subpoenaed, I know that good men and women within the FBI who are friends of ours, who have been friends of the American people without anyone knowing it, they'll show up and tell the truth. But they're not going to go out there necessarily and voluntarily expose themselves to what Steve and I have done, because it's not really that much fun. Unless you have kind of like a real sick sense of humor, which some of this has just made me smile through it, because like, what else are you going to do? Otherwise, you'd be crippled.
No, literally, because you just can't make it up. It's just it's shock and awe 24/7. So, Kyle, what do you think? What are your goals now for the House GOP probes into the weaponization of government? Do you feel optimistic about it? What would you like to see as the outcomes, and kind of what is your, viewpoint, your vision of what a successful investigation would look like?
I've gone back and forth with it. I'm kind of agnostic right now. I just watched the ones where they interviewed Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberg. And here's the thing. I've talked to Taibbi for several hours on a couple different occasions, and he's an incredibly honest and fair-minded human being who's a liberal. Like, we just have to be what he is. He's a Democrat voter historically. Mm-hmm. And, they tried to tear him up because all we're doing right now is attacking the messengers. So we're seeing this absolutely, there's a concerted
when they're scared
effort.
of what you have to say.
100% that. And so we've seen them go after the 3 whistleblowers that have been interviewed. So Steve is one of them, our friend Garrett O'Boyle, and then another guy named George Hill, who's a retired FBI analyst. And all 3 of them have been viciously attacked in the New York Times and CNN and Rolling Stone and some others. And the attacks are both, poorly founded. So we watched the exact same thing happen by the ranking member on the Democrat side and several others. They just are attacking the messengers, but they have nothing to say about the actual allegations that are being there, because the allegations are both founded and easily provable with the documents that we've been bringing forward. So, we'll see. I think the American people are going to have to really demand that their representatives do the right thing. And that's going to have to be bipartisan, because nobody should really want a weaponized DOJ, a weaponized FBI, a weaponized FTC, any of these acronyms. And a CDC should not be weaponized against you. Like, they're supposed to serve us. These are our mechanisms of government. Their job is really just to preserve our liberties and to keep things away from infringing. And they're the ones that are actually infringing right now. It's incredibly dangerous stuff.
It really is. And it's like scary stuff. It's the stuff books are written about, right, Stephen? So, and tell us about your book, and then also what it looks like for you in terms of what you think you'd like to have happen as the outcome for this investigation.
Well, thank you for that. This is the danger that the FBI put it on itself when it left me home with nothing to do and no paycheck. So I was able to actually write the book that I always wanted to write. It's just been an ambition of mine for a long time, and this presented that opportunity. So it's a memoir of some of the experiences I had as a police officer and as an FBI agent. Kind of details the lessons I learned and some of the good work that I got to be part of, and then get into the actual nuts and bolts of the whistleblower complaint that I brought forward to my managers, and the fallout that I suffered as a result of it. And I'm hoping that this just reaches as many eyeballs as possible, regardless of who you pull the lever for every November. It doesn't matter. As an American, this is information that's extremely pertinent to you. And I just hope you just give it an honest and fair hearing, and know that it's coming from somebody who, ultimately brought that information forward with the best intentions. I thought I was consistent with my training, and I thought I was consistent with my oath of office. I wasn't looking to become a grifter or any sort of a public face.
Right. These are the names and labels they throw at you when they try to discredit you. It's just sad, with what they do. But where can people get your book if they want to buy it, the whole deal?
Right now it's on pre-sale at Amazon. The book is called True Blue: My Journey from Beat Cop to FBI Whistleblower. And it will be published July 18th of this year, but you can get an advance copy now. And I would appreciate maybe edging out the Prince of England on as a memoir. So any help would be very, very much greatly appreciated.
Excellent. I love that. All right. So here's what I want to ask you guys about. What is sort of your message for FBI Director Wray? Kyle, I'll start with you.
I think he should resign. I think he should be ashamed of himself. There's only really 2 possible paths that exist. Either one, he's completely unaware of what the FBI is doing, in which case he's incompetent. Or number 2, he is aware of what's going on and he's complicit. And either one of those equal, you should fall on your sword and go away. That's the right answer. I don't think he'll do it. I don't think he has that degree of self-awareness. He's mentioned that he's bubble wrapped from what goes on in the FBI. So that leads us towards the incompetence path. But either one of those should be enough to terminate the employment of someone who is not doing the job. He doesn't work for the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. He works for the American people. And the American people, 50% of them right now, have no trust in the FBI. That should be enough of a vote of no confidence for someone who's leading that agency, or as he says, has oversight over that agency, because he's not leading it. So if you're not going to be a leader, get out of the way. Let somebody step up that will. I don't know who Joe Biden would pick. It probably couldn't be any better or worse at this point. But maybe a new face for a couple days would be okay. It's a shame because he had a great opportunity to come in and clean things up after watching what Comey and McCabe had done.
Absolutely.
And he failed.
We thought it couldn't get worse. But I mean, look at what's
right.
happened. And instead, he's got people, going through my father-in-law's house and Melania's closet. And it's just, to me, it's just so sickening. But, to be honest, in the beginning, people had some, high hopes, a little bit of aspiration that perhaps, he was going to do a good job, right? Would you agree with that? And then it just was not the case.
Yeah. No, people had high hopes. I think, unfortunately, President Trump was, sold a bill of goods on somebody who is basically just a white shoe lawyer who made, over $9 million a year as an attorney. And now he stepped in and he essentially flies around in a private jet and he gets to go to Davos and he flies home. You want to look at commitment. I think that's a really good, gauge of it. The man didn't even move his residence to D.C. He left his family in place. They still live in Buckhead in outside of Atlanta, and he flies home on the FBI's private jet every single weekend. And he does it at our cost. But he does that because he didn't even commit to moving his family up, even though the appointment is a decade long. So every single FBI employee picks up and moves to wherever the field offices that they're assigned. And he didn't do the same thing. So the man is not part of the FBI. He may be having oversight. He may be the top dog there, but he doesn't experience the FBI the way people who really care about the FBI do. And I think it's like a massive indindictment of the type of human being that you are.
It's just it's the facts speak for themselves. What kind of commitment? He's like a part-time guy essentially going in there, reaping the benefits and wreaking havoc and not doing any oversight or any overhaul whatsoever. It's disgraceful. Yeah, he should be thrown out. And then he's trying to now say, oh, people regret that they went in or they didn't want to go raid Mar-a-Lago. I mean, the whole thing is just it's a complete joke. And Stephen, I want to get your take on Christopher Wray.
I think that the interview that he did on Fox News a week ago was pretty revelatory. The first question right out of the box was about public approval. And his response to that was he's not really concerned about it because applications to the FBI are very high right now. And that was just very obvious to me that he is not taking the temperature of the room. Right. This is somebody who is looking at, I'm going to offer people six-figure salaries in a down economy, and that means that I'm doing a good job. And it also indicates to me that because he mentioned we need to know who we're serving and who we're working with. Well, he clearly doesn't view that the American people are his customer. He doesn't view that as who he's serving. He views that as the Biden administration, the political left, and he is very anxious to provide them with a well-compensated, willing workforce that will do its bidding, as we saw with Mark Hawk in Pennsylvania, and the failure to act with the protests outside of the Supreme Court justices' homes when the Dobbs decision was due to come down, and with these January 6th investigations that have gone on, where you have people.
Let me tell you. I mean, January 6th, I did 13 hours of testimony, and I wasn't even at the Capitol. I got up, was with the family, gave a speech, etc. They had me questioned forever, and then they showed me videos of myself when Don says, hey, Kimberly, Princess, dance for, whatever to this, song. And they identify who you see in that photo. I mean, it was so ridiculous. And who is that dancing in the video? I'm like, okay, is this for real? I'm like, that's me. What does this have to do with anything?
They're not serious people.
They're not serious people. And it was 7 lawyers. It was ridiculous. The persecution, the amount of money. They try to do this to just break your spirit and break your bank account. So you have to pay for these lawyers and fight for yourself. It's insane what's gone on. But it wasn't just, FBI investigating. It's what went on now, obviously DOJ. It's what went on in Congress. It was so politicized, and Liz Cheney pretending to lead the way, and Adam Kinzinger, amongst others, like Adam Schiff. It's disgraceful, but it has backfired spectacularly on them, because the American people are seeing the truth. And Tucker Carlson put out the videos thanks to Speaker McCarthy. You just didn't even think you'd be seeing this happen in real life versus some kind of bizarro Hollywood script, right?
It's very apparent. It's very apparent to me that the FBI is content to become an apparatchik, an enforcement arm for a worldview that says that which not is required is banned, and that's a problem. The FBI at its root is supposed to be about law and order, maintaining law and order. when it is creating this illusion that half the country are potential terrorists, you have closed the Overton window off to 50% of men and women in this country who decide to vote for the Republican nominee for president. And we can't have a country that way. We can't have a dialogue where we sit across the table from each other and like someone like Matt Taibbi, who sat at my kitchen table for 5 hours. And he and I probably disagree on a lot of issues, but we could have a constructive dialogue. We could exercise our First Amendments and maybe get to some compromise. But if Matt thinks that I have a suicide bomb strapped to my chest because of who I vote for, then we can't have a country that way.
Yeah, it's really sad. And I sit here as a proud and devout Catholic and Latina, and I think I'm like, and a member of the family, I'm like hitting all of their little bells and whistles, right? Oh God, for these threat tags. You just never know what comes any given day. But here I'm, America first, woman born here in this country, a first generation, and it's sad to see what's happening. That's why I think it's so important to have the courage and to lead by example and to fight back, so we recognize this country and we can actually fight to restore integrity in these institutions and government agencies. But go ahead.
Yeah, we went from, in our lifetimes, we've gone from seeing that the left and the right basically agreed that the value of America was inherent and what the solution was to make it better. And so we disagreed about solutions. And sometime, after my teens, sometime in my 20s and until now, in the last 20 something years, we've basically seen that one side is immoral and evil and the other side is not. And both people are starting to think that way. And it turns out the people that hate America also hate people like me. So I don't have a lot of space to be able to talk to them. And they've closed off that
not
window,
even this much space.
There's nowhere to wiggle there.
No.
And the people that are old school liberals that are like the guys like Matt Taibbi, as we've brought up twice, there's a lot of people like that, and they're not on the right, but the Overton window has shifted so much that the center has left them on the right, because the center is now so far left. That's the middle position, is that you have to, compromise with so many things that are antithetical to Americans' Christian faith, which is overt and is pervasive. You have to compromise with the people that are Jewish, the people that are Islamic. Like, it doesn't matter if you have any of the traditional faiths in this country. You are now on the wrong side of this secular, angry leftist religion, which is like full of zealots. And I don't think most people think that way, but they're willing to compromise because they're the loudest and the scariest and the meanest voice in the room. And they have the FBI on their side and the rest of the government apparatus, it's a truly terrifying thing to see weaponized against us, being Americans.
Yeah, we have to control and, get the majority. We've got Congress, need to take the Senate and take back the White House in 2024. That's for sure. Stephen, I'll give you the final word before we say goodbye.
Well, my hope is that the men and women of the FBI actually stop the iPhone user agreement philosophy with their oath of office and actually consider what's going on, and are willing to. If you're not willing to step forward publicly like Kyle and I have been, that's just fine. There are other means to do it properly. You do get training on that in the FBI. Just study that and make sure that information comes forward to assist with the select committee, because ultimately the power of the purse strings right now are all that the Republicans have, but that is significant power. They are going to be in a situation where it comes to this debt ceiling negotiation and eventually with the appropriation for the next fiscal year, that if this information is presented to the American public and they actually see the atrocities that have gone on in the last few years, there will be a groundswell to pull funding from the FBI and at least direct it in a way that everybody feels is appropriate for America's quote unquote premier law enforcement agency.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, listen, on a personal note, I was recruited by the FBI and I came this close to going and, signing up. I did all the exams, everything, was heading to Quantico, and then I decided to take an offer at the San Francisco DA's office. So I just wonder where that would have led, but it's
dodged a bullet.
Yeah, I dodged a bullet. I mean, I don't know. I've taken a few other bullets, but besides that, it's interesting, just that moment in time when I decided, not to do it. It's interesting. But you're two brave men, God bless you, and great patriots, and thank you for your sacrifice to this country, and I wish the best to you both and to your families and for your future, and I know everybody else out there that's watching does it well. So thank you for being with me.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank you.
All right. And more coming up in just a moment. But first, I want to take a moment to be grateful, to be thankful, and acknowledge our brave sponsors, or shows like this would not be possible, like Patriot Mobile. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. With Patriot Mobile, you put America first with every single call you make, all while getting the same nationwide coverage as major carriers. And not only does Patriot Mobile provide you dependable wireless service at an affordable price, they also share your values. Think about it. Share your values, share your money with them, somebody that actually supports our cause, and they support you. Patriot Mobile puts their dollars into action, donating a portion of every dollar to support groups that fight for the First Amendment, the sanctity of life, and protecting our brave police and first responders. Support companies who support you. It's a simple philosophy. And you can vote with your dollars, right? Make a difference and vote to support Patriot Mobile. So for free activation, go to patriotmobile.com/Kimberly. And again, free activation, patriotmobile.com/Kimberly. So we're excited about them. We love them. It's a great company. Patriot Mobile is mobilizing freedom and supporting you. And in closing tonight, remember that equal justice is at the center of our identity as an American people. It's what is supposed to separate us from dictatorship or authoritarians in the rest of the world. And what we are suffering from under Biden and his allies inside the entrenched political swamp. It threatens all of us. And it's those on the left who constantly preach about the threats to democracy who are the same ones trying to undermine it themselves. Law enforcement isn't a tool to target political enemies. It is supposed to be blind to bias and free from partisan meddling. It's why Congress' oversight role is so important, and why the whistleblowers, like you saw here tonight, being brave enough to come forward is so vital to this mission. And now, more than ever, it's the time to stand up against the massive abuse of power inside the highest levels of our government, and why shows like this, I believe, are so important. It's why I want to take time to thank our brave sponsors, like Goldco. Gold and silver can protect your retirement savings from inflation and dollar devaluation. You can roll over your 401k or your IRA into precious metals and safeguard your savings tax and penalty free. From precious metals, IRAs to direct purchases of gold and silver, Goldco has it all and has helped thousands of Americans to diversify and protect their retirement savings. Support companies, it's that simple, who support you, instead of supporting woke companies who hate us. So go to kimmetals.com to learn more. That's kimmetals.com. So I want to thank you for supporting this show and for supporting free and independent voices. And in the meantime, be sure to follow me at Kimberly Guilfoyle here on Rumble and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And also be sure to follow me across all platforms on Twitter, Truth Social, Facebook, and Instagram. And hop on over to locals.com/Kim Guilfoyle, where you can subscribe for a live Q&A where nothing is off limits. And comment down below. Tell me what you think, who you want to see interviewed, and what stories you are most interested in. It's been a pleasure being with you. Have a great night, and I'll see you soon.